everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today we're gonna have a lot of fun. We're gonna dye some yarn and a sock blank and hopefully create something pretty magical. And so before we jump in, I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to today's lab partner, Michelle. Michelle, thank you so much for being my lab partner for today's episode of Dyepot Weekly. The yarns that we're gonna dye today don't match each other. We're gonna be dyeing a Knit Pick Stroll fingering weight sock blank. This double-stranded blank is 75% superwash merino wool, 25% nylon, and is knit with 2 strands of yarn held together. So this blank will unravel into a pair of matched 50-gram balls of yarn, which then can be used for matched socks or gloves or what have you. The other 2 skeins of yarn that we have here are Knit Picks Swish DK. This yarn is 100% superwash merino wool, and yeah, I mean, I guess the superwash merino is the comparison we have, but I still plan to dye all of this in one pan and to create something colorful and beautiful. And as we go through all of this, we can chat about the differences between dyeing a sock blank, where you have one end of yarn at one end, the other all the way down at the other, versus a skein of yarn, which is a circle, and so those color progressions will repeat multiple times throughout the use of that yardage. If you want to learn more about any of the yarns or dyes or tools and equipment I'm using in this video, I have links and affiliate links down in my video description. I try to include these links in all of my videos, and I also will include under the video content section the colors that I use. If I have measurements, the measurements of those colors and the time and everything, so that way you get like a little quick guide recipe, or you can jump to the chapters to find out the info you need if you want to do this project yourself. I pulled a bunch of beautiful cool toned dye stocks that I have on hand. I have Caribbean Blue, Electric Violet, Royal Purple, Emerald Green, and Intense Iris. And I think I'm going to focus first on these 4 colors in approximately this order, and I'm going to save the Caribbean Blue for something else. This is my 4-inch deep full-size catering steam pan. And I'm going to bring over, I'll arrange it nicer in a second. I'm going to bring over our 2 skeins of yarn and then our sock blank. I didn't squeeze out very much liquid because I'm going to pour on enough liquid to provide coverage in a moment. But with the sock blank, the main thing is I want it to be unfolded, and then as I sort of scrunch it up, I'm going to try to keep the edges untwisted. The way that colors will go on this will be really fun, but a little bit sort of random as well, and sort of just squishing it in. And then for the yarns, I'm going to do something a little bit similar. We're going to add some water on top of everything. But rather than having it folded on itself, I'm kind of scrunching it up a little bit here. Once I add some water, we're going to be able to do this a little bit better. A lot of times I measure out and tell you exactly the volume of water I add. Today, I'm going to be taking some of the pre-soak that I had and add some of that back on, because I want to hit a point, okay, where we can have things decently submerged but still have some yarn that is at the surface. And so I would say that with 300 grams of stuff in here, maybe 8 to 10 cups would be my estimate. And then even though we're going to start cold, so in theory I can work things through, I'm going to go ahead and add 3 tablespoons of white vinegar in here already. And just kind of quickly mix it up. If I really wanted it to be distributed better, I would do it beforehand, before we added the yarn in, but we're good. Okay. I'm going to pop my gloves on, and while we're still at room temperature, we'll start adding on these colors. Okay, I'm actually going to flip the order around. All of these stock solutions, I believe, are 1% stock solutions. Okay, let's start up by the zip ties. So I shake this up, and we're gonna pour on some electric violet. Next, I'm gonna take this one. I need to shake a bit better. The royal purple, just because it has some pinks in there that do crash out. Don't worry, I'm planning on working things through. Okay, then next we have some emerald green, which is a color that is a bit of a spreader. It also blends beautifully with royal purple, which is why I have added it there. And then we have some intense iris, which I probably should have shook a little bit better, but now I'm gonna start working these colors through a bit. Oh man, and you can see that they are striking a bit where they've been placed already. And this movement may move them through a fair amount, maybe not. We may still have some whites left. Ooh, that electric violet really kind of went quickly. But I plan, once we flip everything, to bring that Caribbean blue on to the other side and to work that through. Okay, I think we're pretty good. I want to add a touch more of the intense iris just to the very end. And similarly, I'm a little bit nervous about trying to a little bit more electric violet. I'm a little bit nervous about trying to flip this, just because I don't know how well, like, I know it will work well for the yarn, but I don't know about flipping the blank. Because we know that we have like pastel, yeah, we've got a lot of light areas down there, but we can try to work these colors through. They have not all sort of struck yet, but I now can come over with more of our pre-soak and add more liquid. And as we do this, you saw that that green sort of moved down. I want to shimmy it to just raise things up. That also can help some of these liquids go through a few more layers. And the other thing that I can do is just add a little bit more acid. Because you see, we do still have color. I love the difference between the royal purple and the electric violet. Yeah, we definitely do still have color in there. Okay. All right, let's go over to the heat, because I want to start heating it up before we flip it to apply color to the other side. At least I think that's what I want to do. Once again, I'm a little bit nervous about flipping the blank, but we will figure that out. Maybe we'll remove everything to put the blank in first, so then we can put the rest of the yarn in. We'll figure it out. Now I'm going to turn on the heat. We are across 2 gas burners on my stove. Everything I use to dye yarn is dedicated for dyeing yarn and is never used for the preparation of food. So this pan, the tongs, the spoons that you'll see me use, all of that is dedicated for dyeing yarn. And then I clean the stove area really well before I use it as a kitchen again. Okay, I am going to set a timer for 15 minutes. I will check on this in the meantime, but I picked 15 minutes because maybe not the green, there may be some greens left, but we should see a lot of these colors really start to soak into the yarn in that time, I think. I will keep an eye on it and reduce the heat to low. Actually, I'll go down to medium now. So that way, yeah, things don't get too agitated. We are nice and bubbly. And there's a hint of some green, but that is what that color is going to do. Everything else is looking quite clear. Okay, here's how we are gonna do this. We are gonna pick up the sock blank, and you can see we've got some whites in there. Okay. And we are flipping it over. I don't think I've ever flipped a sock blank before. We will arrange it a little bit better in a moment, but we'll come in with our yarn, and we do have some whites left. Ideally, we would have those all at the surface. There we go, because we're going to bring our other color in, and hopefully we are arranged pretty nicely. Now, before we grab the Caribbean blue, I do think I want to add a little bit more water. I'm planning on adding more water with that Caribbean blue, but I want things to be a little bit less compressed. This is going to allow the blues to spread out, but it won't be like the most even thing either. Okay, I'm going to add some more acid just to help, and I know I added some more over on that side. Okay, I'm still using the pre-soak water for this, but I am going to add just 2 tablespoons, which is only 30 milliliters, in 500 milliliters of water. And now I'm going to pour it on. And this time I'm not going to work it through. This color will spread. Okay, it will spread through, but I'm intentionally both spreading it all over, but not all the way over, if that makes sense. Just to add a little bit more dimension into the piece. And so previously we added each of those colors in sections, but now with this bright blue coming in, which the blue will spread. It's gonna spread a lot. And over the blank, which is mostly submerged, you can see it there. I don't think I need to add more. I think that this amount is perfect. And I'm gonna set a timer for 30 minutes. But even if the blue spreads all over, given that it's gonna be more saturated in some areas than others, it's just gonna add a little bit more dimension with that progression that we already had in here. And I'm very, very excited about it. So I guess I'll see you in 30 minutes. Now we're at the point where I start crossing my fingers. Now, emerald green, you see how we see a little green coming out? It is a color that will bleed when you add it into water. And so it is a color that can cause backstaining, but oh my gosh, this yarn that I accidentally picked up, gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. I'm gonna turn off the heat now. And so there are times when you are dyeing yarn where you may want to dye a layer with one technique and then over dye it with another color. Ooh, this is so fun. But if you do that with, ooh, I like the little bit of pastel right there. But if you start with something that has that green in it and then want to immersion dye it, you will or can end up with some of that green coming back out, and then having that green go all over. I have dyed both sides of soft blanks before, but not quite like this. I don't think I usually flip them, and so that just makes all of this extra exciting. And as for our yarn, I want to make sure it cools completely before we wash it, because right now if we go wash it, I think a little bit of that green might come out. You know, now I'm unsure if it's just my stained pan Or if, no, I think there's like the slightest hint of color in here. But almost all the color is in our yarn, so I'm very happy about that. Let's wash our yarn. I love this. I liked it before we added the blue on top, but I think that that just gave it an extra oomph. And I'm becoming obsessed with this overall technique. Now the blank, which don't get me wrong, I also love the blank, and I think layering the colors gave it some more dimension for the colors, but ironically maybe a little bit less dimension than what we see in the yarn. So I don't know, but I'm happy with all of it. Now, you know what I haven't talked about a lot? What will happen when we unravel the blank versus the yarn? And I mentioned it at the beginning, but the yarn is going to be semi-repeating, right? Because we have the purples and the green will happen in a repeating way. Whereas over here, yes, both skeins you unravel will have this green section, but overall it's going to be more asymmetric, more striped / gradient, but also probably with some reverse speckles. I don't know yet if I'm unraveling this, but when you pull the stitches apart, we are totally not in focus. You can see that lighter color in there. That means that we're gonna have a little bit of speckling, and that happens with the blanks. You can do things to minimize it more, but it's just because of the way that the blanks are a fabric and the way the yarn is sort of held against itself that you have more trouble dyeing those sections. And so even at times when it's minimized, it still exists. I love these colors under the water. I mean, these shifts from the way the color layers. Oh, it's a reason why sometimes adding yarn in multiple steps, or adding dyes in multiple steps can give way more dimension, because you get like different proportions of the two colors mixing together when it sort of, when the colors strike, versus if I had combined the colors from the get-go, we wouldn't have that added dimension and mermaid-like quality. I don't know if this absorbed less dye overall than the other yarn. I don't know. I mean, I've definitely dyed blanks in the same pan before, but not that much. I'm trying to not accidentally unravel it. You could add a safety line into the live stitches so that way you don't accidentally unravel it. That's more trouble than it's worth when it will be unraveled at some point anyway. But anyways, I am gonna go pop everything in the spin dryer, hang it up to dry, so we can look at everything and see how it turned out. Before bringing out the sock blank, I wanted to just take a look at the pretty yarn, because these were dyed at opposite ends of the pan and may have some minor differences. The other thing I love is that the violet and then the, was it royal purple, look very different, as does our iris down there, even with the blue on top. There's definitely differences between these. I think, you know, there are some similarities as well, but this is a kind of technique where you are gonna have dye lot differences even within one pan. But let's get that sock blank over. So while the sock blank has similar color progressions, it has a kind of different feel overall. Mainly because I'm not seeing very much bright blue that is peeking through on the yarn. But let's flip it over, because we actually had the wrong side up when we poured the blue on. And I do see a little bit more of some of that bright blue here, a little bit of it down there as well. But overall, I would say the blue isn't making the same amount of impact, probably because we had ended up with more coverage over the whole blank than we did on like our skeins of yarn. So this is actually pretty interesting to me, and I'll have to think about how to play around with this to immersion dye a blank to get coverage that is a little bit patchier like we had on the yarn. Just because if you think about, look at the volume that these yarns are taking up. And then even when I scrunch up the sock blank, this is taking up a lot less volume because it's knit into a blank, which has things a little bit more compressed. And even if the volume is the same, when you have dyes on, there's more space if the water is at the top for things to move around. Whereas here, the dyes can't move as far. And so, yeah, this is just a really interesting comparison to me and something I would like to explore more in the future. I have the wrong side of the blank up right now, but when you look at it, it feels like you're gonna have some pretty solid like gradient sections, but in actuality, if we zoom in on this area, for example, you can see how we've got purples and blues. We have that depth and variation in there. We will get variegated sections when this blank is unraveled. In addition, if you take the blank and pull it apart again, see those whites in there? Those are going to be little reverse speckles. And in fact, you can see a little bit of that like over here on this yarn because a tiny bit of the blank has unraveled. But even with the variegated sections, overall, this is going to go through one purple, another purple, green, and then blue as you work through the blank. But you will get those matched 50-gram balls of yarn, so the color transitions will happen in the same place on each skein. Whereas these skeins that are now twisted, the colorway will have like a repeating element to it, but you're gonna go through the green on maybe not every round, it depends on what you're making with the DK weight yarn, but the transitions from purple to green to purple and back again is gonna happen over and over and over. And depending on the project you're doing and your gauge, it could pool. Now, there's some randomness to it that could mean that things don't pool quite as much, but still, there is a chance that it could pool. I definitely don't recommend using it for planned pooling because things aren't precise enough to pool the exact same way through a whole project, but that is something that you need to consider. And so once again, the perk of a blank is since one end of the skein is here, the other end is all the way over here, you can get that asymmetric, that more variegated gradient type colorway, whereas here, the color progression, like the end of both could be at the same spot. And so you could start at this purple and end on that purple, but then go through the other colors on the way there. And actually, I did misspeak. The progression will go purple, purple, green, like irisy purple, green, purple, 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 you know, it's sort of going to go back and forth because of the way this was laid out. Sometimes if you don't want your colorway to go back and forth in a repeating way, you can lay it out. I wouldn't do it in an immersion situation, but you can lay it out in a big circle and do like quadrants or thirds of the skein in different colors, so then you end up with something more, I guess, traditionally repeating. Michelle, thank you so much for being my lab partner for today's episode of Dyepot Weekly. I really hope that you are going to love the yarn that I created here today. And if you want to learn more about how you can become a lab partner like Michelle, where you can pick the yarn bases that I'll dye in my video. And Michelle picked a skein of Swish DK yarn and a sock blank. And so that is what I dyed in this video. Now, if you have a particular idea for a project you would like to see, please message me on Etsy in advance so we can talk about if that project is doable in the time frame for when you're signing up, and so that way we're both on the same page. But otherwise, I come up with a project as a complete surprise. I do look at your color preferences to avoid your least favorite colors, and the whole thing is so much fun. But anyway, Michelle, thank you again for being my lab partner. I hope you're going to love your yarn, because I know I'm obsessed with it. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits. Please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. Thank you so much for watching.